The city's most feared millionaire found the cleaner in his bed, and his order left everyone speechless. Before we go on, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I love knowing how far these stories reach. The penthouse door swung open at 3 a.m. Ricardo Almeida walked in, weighed down by a disastrous meeting and the irritation of a delayed flight. He loosened his designer tie as he headed straight for his bedroom, his firm steps echoing on the polished travertine marble floor that gleamed under the automatic lights. All he wanted was silence, control, the predictable solitude of the space he'd built exactly as he'd planned. But when he switched on the bedside lamp and saw what was on his bed, everything stopped. A woman was sleeping there, utterly surrendered to sleep, curled on her side. Her navy blue cleaning uniform clung to her body with sweat, her feet still clad in old, worn-out sneakers. She was breathing deeply, her mouth slightly open, her calloused hands resting on her face like an exhausted child who had finally found rest. Ricardo felt a surge of fury, hot as lava. No one entered his bedroom, no one touched his bed, no one crossed that invisible line separating his space from the rest of the universe. And this woman hadn't just crossed it. She'd laid there as if it were her right. 2 steps towards the mattress, jaw clenched, fists tight. He was going to wake her, he was going to yell, he was going to call security and make sure she never set foot on any of his properties again. But then he saw the fresh cuts on her fingers, the telltale marks of hard work on her hands, her young face looking far older, as if life had charged her decades of exhaustion in advance. And something in that silent dignity, in that exhaustion so profound that even sleep couldn't fully conquer it, made him pause in the doorway. Renata, the supervisor, and 2 security guards watched with barely disguised horror. They had seen Ricardo arrive. They knew what he would find. They expected an explosion. Ricardo Almeida didn't forgive transgressions. Never had. It was part of the reputation he'd built. A fair man, but absolutely ruthless. "Mr. Almeida," Renata whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know how this happened. She's new, started last week. I'll wake her now. And how many people were rostered for this shift?" The question cut through the air like a blade. Renata swallowed hard. 3, sir. But 2 didn't come in. She did it alone. The whole building, 12 floors, offices, bathrooms, corridors, alone. Ricardo looked again at the sleeping woman, doing the math in his head. 6, 7 hours of continuous work to clean what was designed for 3 people. And when did she start? At 7 p.m., sir. It's 3 a.m. now, 8 hours straight. And before that, other jobs? Renata hesitated. "I don't know, sir. Find out. I want to know how many hours she worked today. All of them. And I want to know why 2 employees were absent and no one arranged a replacement." "Yes, sir. Can I wake her?" "No." The silence that followed was absolute. Renata blinked, confused. "Sir, no one touches her." Ricardo's voice was low, controlled, with that steely tone that brooked. No questioning. Let her sleep. "But, Mr. Almeida, it's against the rules. She can't— I know what's against the rules. You're going to let her sleep anyway." Renata opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the security guards who seemed equally lost. Everyone there knew who Ricardo Almeida was. He was Sydney's toughest businessman, the man who fired managers for being 3 minutes late, who personally reviewed every contract because he trusted no one. 38 years old, he'd built a property empire without allowing anyone to take liberties. And this woman had just taken the biggest one of all. But Ricardo didn't yell, didn't call security. He walked to the walk-in closet with measured steps, picked up a blanket he never used, returned, and carefully covered Juliana so as not to wake her. She stirred lightly, a sigh escaping her lips, but continued sleeping, too exhausted to notice anything. "You can go," Ricardo said, stepping out of the room and gently closing the door. Renata followed him to the living room, clearly trying to understand. "You're not going to fire her? I'll decide that when she wakes up. For now, the woman rests. But, sir, if the other employees find out, if anyone comments on what they saw here, they'll lose their job instantly. Understood?" "Yes, sir. You can go." When he was alone, Ricardo walked to the panoramic window in the living room. Sydney stretched out below, lights twinkling to the horizon. The city that never slept, never stopped, that swallowed people every day and spat them back out at the end of their shift. Exhausted, invisible, forgotten, he stood there for 3 hours. He didn't go to the guest room, didn't turn on his computer, didn't check emails. He just watched and thought, and as he thought, a question echoed perturbingly. When was the last time someone felt safe enough in my presence to fall asleep? The answer bothered him more than it should have. Juliana woke with her heart pounding and her stomach churning with panic. It took her 3 seconds to remember where she was, 2 more to realize what she'd done, fallen asleep in the occupant's bed. She sat up so fast her head spun, her eyes sweeping the room, now bathed in the soft morning light. 6:20, read the digital clock on the bedside table. She had slept for 4 hours. 4 hours in a client's bed. Me God, me God, me God. Good morning. The voice came from the doorway. Juliana turned her head and felt the air leave her lungs. A man stood there, tall, in a dark, impeccable suit, even at this hour. Black hair slicked back, dark eyes observing her with an intensity that wasn't anger, but also wasn't kindness. It was pure evaluation. Ricardo Almeida, the owner. She knew his name from the intercom plaque, but had never seen him. He was never home during her shifts. Until now. Mr. Almeida. Her voice came out hoarse with sleep and desperation. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I just sat down for a second in 18 hours. She stopped. What? You worked 18 hours yesterday. The statement wasn't a question. It was a confirmed fact. 3 different jobs. Started at 6 a.m. cleaning offices in the CBD, then a residential complex in an affluent inner-city area. Got here at 7 p.m. for a shift meant for 3 people, alone. Finished at 2:30 a.m. Juliana felt her face burn. He had investigated. Of course he had. Men like him always investigated before destroying. I need the money, she said, forcing dignity into her voice, even knowing she was already done for. I've got 2 daughters. My mum looks after them, but she can't work anymore. So it's just me, and if I lose this job I understand. But why didn't you ask to stop? The question disarmed her. Stop? Who would I ask? Sir, Renata said if we didn't finish all 12 floors, we didn't need to come back on Monday. So, I finished. Ricardo was silent for a long moment, then entered the room, pulled the desk chair over, and sat down. A surprisingly informal gesture. Sit. Juliana hesitated. On the bed? On the floor? Sit right there. She obeyed, sitting on the edge of the mattress, hands in her lap, fingers intertwined, awaiting her sentence. But the sentence didn't come. What came was another question. Have you eaten anything in the last 18 hours? Juliana blinked. I had a cereal bar on the bus. Ricardo picked up the internal phone. Renata, send up a full breakfast. Toast, fruit, juice, eggs, whatever you have. Now. He hung up before the supervisor could respond. He looked back at Juliana. I'm not firing you. Not today. The words took a second to process. She blinked several times. You're not? No, but I want honest answers. Can you do that? Juliana nodded slowly, still suspicious. Why didn't you lie? You could have made up any excuse when you woke up. Feeling unwell, dizzy, confused. But you told the truth. Why? Because lying wouldn't have changed anything. The answer came. Simple, direct. If you wanted to fire me, you'd fire me anyway. At least this way, I leave knowing I didn't demean myself. Ricardo felt something clench in his chest. Something old, forgotten, like a dusty memory he didn't want to revisit. How old are you? 36. Married? Widowed? He died 4 years ago. Motorcycle accident. Left debts. I lost everything. The house, the car, our stability. I was left with 2 small daughters and a hole where life used to be. It wasn't self-pity. It was just a statement of fact. Juliana spoke like someone reading a financial report. Neutral, direct, without drama. And you studied? I graduated with honors in business administration from university. Worked 3 years in a multinational management area. When the recession hit, I was the first cut. Too young, too expensive, too easy to replace. I looked for a job for a year. Nothing. The bills don't wait. So I took what came along. Ricardo observed her as if seeing her for the first time. Business administration, management, and cleaning toilets. Cleaning is honest work, Juliana said firmly. It pays the bills. It feeds my daughters. It doesn't bring me shame. It brings me exhaustion, yes, but not shame. The distinction was important. There was a knock at the door. Renata entered, pushing a trolley with a full breakfast. Fresh bread, fruits, freshly squeezed orange juice, still, warm, scrambled eggs. She placed everything on the side table and left quickly, without looking directly at Juliana. Eat, Ricardo ordered. Juliana looked at the food as if it were a trap. I'm not hungry. Lie. Your stomach just rumbled. Eat. She picked up a piece of toast slowly, as if expecting it to disappear if she moved too fast. The first bite was cautious, the second less so. By the third, she was eating for real, and Ricardo saw her entire body relax, against her will. It was real hunger, the kind the body can't hide. "Your daughters," he said. "What are their names?" "Luna and Sophia, 9 and 6. "And what do they want to be when they grow up?" Juliana stopped chewing. No one ever asked that. "Luna wants to be an English teacher. She loves reading. Sophia wants to be a doctor. Says she'll look after her grandmother when she gets older." "Do you think they'll make it?" The question was genuine. Juliana looked at him directly. "I'll do everything I can to make sure they do. Even if I have to work 20 hours a day, they won't grow up thinking dreaming is a luxury. Dreaming is a luxury." The phrase echoed in Ricardo's head like a bell. When was the last time he'd dreamt of anything beyond expansion, contracts, profits? When was the last time he'd allowed anything beyond targets to occupy his mind? He couldn't remember. "Look, Mr. Almeida." Juliana wiped her mouth with a cloth napkin. "I appreciate the breakfast and thank you for not firing me, but I need to know, do I still have work here or not? I need to go home, change clothes, and get back for my next shift at 2 p.m. I don't have time to be kept in suspense. You have work. But this won't happen again. If you feel like you're going to collapse, stop. Understood?" "Understood." Juliana stood up. "Can I go?" "You can. But, Juliana." She paused at the door. "Thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me I'd forgotten to actually see people." The phrase caught her off guard. She nodded once, left, and closed the door behind her. Ricardo was left alone in the room, looking at the rumpled bed where a woman had slept not out of invasion, but pure exhaustion. And for the first time in years, he felt small. The alarm clock rang at 4:30 a.m. the next day, as it did every day. Juliana opened her eyes with that familiar feeling of tiredness that never quite went away. Her apartment in the working-class suburb was still dark, the sound of the first buses starting their routes below. She got up carefully so as not to wake Luna and Sophia, who slept, huddled together in the tiny room next door. She passed through the living room where her mother snored softly on the sofa bed, grey hair spread on the pillow, gnarled hands that could no longer hold a mop, but could still cradle granddaughters with affection. In the bathroom, Juliana washed her face with cold water, trying to wake muscles that begged for a few more hours of sleep. She looked in the mirror and saw what she always saw, a 36-year-old woman who looked 45, deep, dark circles under her eyes, hair starting to grey at the temples, worry lines etched between her eyebrows. But her eyes still held that determination that had sustained her through everything. She put on her light blue cleaning uniform for the first shift, different from the navy blue of the night, and went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. 3 slices of toast, cheap butter, but the girls loved it. Strong, bitter coffee, because sugar was a luxury she couldn't afford. She ate standing, looking out the small window at the neighborhood waking up around her. Houses and shacks stacked one on top of the other, colors faded by sun and rain, clothes hanging on improvised lines. But also life, neighbors greeting each other, a dog barking, a radio playing a quiet tune somewhere. Community was what this area had that rich places never would. At 5:15, Juliana left, descended the cracked concrete stairs, walked through narrow alleys where bakeries were already opening and street sweepers were tidying outside homes, then walked to the bus stop on the main road, the first bus of the day, packed with people going to work. Cleaners, security guards, cooks, concierges, the invisible people who made Sydney function. Juliana squeezed herself between sweaty bodies, holding onto the overhead strap as the bus rattled over speed humps. 40 minutes to the CBD, an hour and a half if traffic was bad. Enough time to close her eyes and rest while standing, always alert not to miss her stop. She thought of her girls, Luna with her neat handwriting in her notebooks, reading everything she could get her hands on. Sophia with her drawings of doctors saving everyone, always with bandages and stethoscopes made of colored pencils. They were the reason, always had been, when her husband died and left debts that turned security into a nightmare. When she lost her job at the multinational and spent a year knocking on doors that slammed in her face. When she had to choose between pride and survival. It was always the girls. Luna asking if they'd have to leave school. Sophia crying because she was hungry. Those moments had burned away any last vestiges of vanity Juliana still carried. In the first office, she cleaned meeting rooms where multi-million-dollar contracts were discussed. She wiped down mahogany tables where expensive laptops lay forgotten, open. She emptied bins full of wasted food that would feed her daughters for days. And she did it all with the same meticulousness she had when she worked there wearing a business suit and presenting reports to directors. Because dignity wasn't in the job title, it was in how you did it. At 10 a.m., she finished her first shift. She took another bus, this time to an affluent residential area, luxury apartments with 4 bedrooms, where entire families lived in spaces larger than her entire apartment. She cleaned double-height entrance lobbies, washed imported marble floors, polished mirrors where she never saw her own reflection because she was always invisible. By 2:15, she was at the bus stop again, exhausted, her back aching, her hands rough from so many chemicals. But the last shift still remained, the night shift at Mr. Almeida's building. And for the first time in weeks, Juliana felt something different thinking about that job. Nervousness, not fear of being fired, but fear of being seen. The weeks that followed developed a strange pattern. Juliana worked in the penthouse on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, always the night shift. Ricardo, who normally was never home at those times because he practically lived at the office, started coming home earlier, not every day, just sometimes. Casually, at least that's what he told himself. He never spoke to her directly, only observed from a distance, from the half-open office door, watching how she worked. Methodical, efficient, without wasted movement. There was no nervous rush, just constant, precise work. And he started to notice things. The way other building staff treated her, the night concierge who made comments when she passed through the lobby. "Hey, gorgeous, looking good today. When are you gonna give me your number?" Juliana never responded, just kept walking, head held high, as if he didn't exist. The building manager who always gave her the most difficult floors, the dirtiest bathrooms, the tasks no one wanted. Juliana never complained, she just did it. The accountant who forgot to sign the timesheets, forcing her to chase him for days to get paid. Juliana never lost her patience. She just persisted with that unnatural calm Ricardo had seen that first morning. One night, he saw her in the penthouse gourmet kitchen, kneeling on the marble floor, arms elbow deep inside the industrial oven he never used because he never cooked. She was scrubbing with an abrasive sponge, her hands already red. It must have hurt, but she didn't stop. Ricardo entered with his briefcase, pretending he needed water. "How long have you been doing that?" 2 hours. Juliana didn't look up. 2 hours in an oven I never use? The instructions say monthly deep clean for all appliances. Doesn't say if it's used or not. Ricardo put down his briefcase. "And if I told you it wasn't necessary, you'd still do it. Why?" "Because if I don't, and someone checks later and finds it dirty, I lose my job, and I can't afford that luxury." He watched her chapped hands, her tireless movements. "You never stop. Stopping isn't an option when you have people depending on you." Ricardo leaned against the counter. "The other staff don't treat you well." This made Juliana stop her hands for a moment. "Are you observing me, sir? It's my building. I observe everything. Then you know I'm not the only one treated like this. Everyone in cleaning is invisible until they make a mistake. Then suddenly we become very visible. That's not right." Juliana took her arms out of the oven, sat back on her heels, and looked at him. "It's not right, but it's how it is. And I don't have the privilege of fighting moral battles when I have 2 mouths to feed." "And if you did have that privilege," Juliana frowned, "I don't understand. What would you do differently if you had financial security? If you didn't have to put up with disgusting comments or impossible jobs or late payments because you're scared of losing your job?" She was silent, evaluating if it was a trick. "Why do you ask that?" "Curiosity. The curiosity of the rich is dangerous for the poor." "I'm not trying to be dangerous." "Then stop asking questions whose answers won't change anything." Ricardo felt frustration growing. "How do you know I won't change anything?" "Because if you were going to change it, you would have already." She stood up, wiping her hands on her apron. "You're the owner. You have the power. If the comments bother you, fire the concierge. If the impossible jobs seem unfair, talk to the building manager. If late payments are wrong, talk to the accountant. But you don't." Because she cleared her throat deep down. "We're still invisible, except now I'm an invisible person you found sleeping in your bed. That makes me temporarily interesting, until I'm not anymore." The words hit him like punches, and the worst part was, she was right. He had noticed everything, felt discomfort, but hadn't acted. Because acting meant admitting the system had flaws, and admitting that meant accepting responsibility. "You're right," he said. Finally. Juliana blinked in surprise. "What? You're right. I saw. I didn't act. That changes now." Juliana went back to plunging her arms into the oven. "Pretty words. They don't put food on the table, Mr. Almeida. If you really want to change something, change it. But don't use me as a social conscience project. I can't carry that on top of everything else I already carry." And she went back to work as if he wasn't there, as if he were invisible. And for the first time in his life, Ricardo Almeida understood what it was like to be ignored. The next day, the concierge was fired, not with a scandal, not with drama. Ricardo simply called the building manager that morning and said, "Jorge no longer works here, effective immediately. Arrange a replacement today." "But, Mr. Almeida, he's been here 10 years, and 10 years making inappropriate comments to female staff. It's over." The accountant was called to a meeting at 9 a.m. Ricardo received him in his office with an expression that left no room for negotiation. "All timesheets will be signed on the day of service, no exceptions. If an employee has to chase you 3 times for a signature, you lose your monthly bonus. On the 4th time, you lose your job. Understood?" The accountant, a man in his 50s accustomed to minor power trips, went pale. "Yes, sir." The building manager received a formal written warning. Ricardo summoned her to a meeting at the end of the afternoon. He showed her a detailed spreadsheet of work distribution for the last 3 months. The same names always getting the worst tasks. Always the same people overloaded, while others had light shifts. "Explain this." The building manager, a woman in her 60s who governed the building like a personal fiefdom, tried to justify. "They're the best workers, Mr. Almeida. That's why I trust them with the most difficult areas. Or they're the ones who don't complain because they need the job too much." Awkward silence. "As of today, work distribution will be rotating and fair. I will personally review it every month. If I see this pattern again, you're out. Understood?" "Yes, sir." Ricardo didn't say anything to Juliana about the actions he took. He didn't send a message, didn't make an announcement, didn't seek recognition. He simply acted and let the consequences speak for themselves. But the next time Juliana entered the building, she noticed immediate differences. The new concierge, a young, polite man, greeted her with genuine respect. "Good evening, madam. Do you need any help with anything?" It wasn't condescending, it was genuine courtesy. In the service elevator, she encountered the building manager who, for the first time in months, spoke to her civilly. "Juliana, you're on the 11th floor today. The upper floors are with Marcia." The voice wasn't warm, but it wasn't hostile either. It was neutral, professional, and when she went to get her timesheet signed at the end of her shift, the accountant already had the paper ready, pen in hand. "Sorry about the delays those other times," he said, without looking her in the eye. "It won't happen again." Juliana took the signed sheet, looked at it as if it were a mirage, and left without saying anything. But when she passed Ricardo in the elevator the next night, he going down, she going up, a brief 2-second crossing, she looked directly into his eyes for a second longer than necessary and nodded once. Silent recognition. "I saw what you did." They weren't words, but Ricardo understood perfectly, and he felt something he hadn't felt in years, pride that didn't come from a closed contract or an inaugurated building. It came from having done the right thing without expecting anything in return. The event was his business partner's idea. "We need to showcase the new penthouses," Maurice said in a meeting. "Do something spectacular, bring in buyers, show off the luxury standard. Your penthouse would be perfect." Ricardo agreed because it made business sense. Not because he liked the idea of turning his private space into a showroom, but business was business. They organized it for the following Friday. 50 people, business owners, investors, Sydney's elite, with enough money to buy $5 million apartments without batting an eyelid. The penthouse was transformed. Imported flowers, 5-star catering, a French champagne bar, a string quartet playing classical music, all coordinated to demonstrate exactly the kind of life one could have in an Almeida Constructions property. Ricardo, dressed in a tuxedo, slicked his hair back, put on the social mask he wore for these events. The successful businessman, charming but inaccessible, rich but approachable, powerful but not arrogant. It was an act he had perfected over the years. Guests began arriving at 8, each more ostentatious than the last. Women in dresses that cost more than Juliana's annual salary. Men with watches that could pay for her daughter's university tuition. All smiling, drinking, appraising every corner of the apartment with the eyes of professional appraisers. At 9, Ricardo noticed movement in the service corridor. It was Juliana, in her navy blue uniform, backpack slung over her shoulder, clearly arriving for her night shift. She stopped when she saw the crowd, her eyes scanning the space with the expression of someone who had just walked onto the wrong stage. Renata appeared behind her, irritated. "I told you there was no work today," she hissed quietly. "I didn't get a message." Juliana responded in the same tone. "I sent it in the group. My phone broke. I didn't see." Renata grabbed her arm with unnecessary force. "Well, now you know. Go home, and next time, check the schedule." Juliana pulled away with a firm but not aggressive movement. "Let go of me." Her voice wasn't loud, but it had an edge that made Renata recoil. Several guests had noticed the exchange. Conversations dwindled as eyes turned to the corridor where the scene was unfolding. Ricardo felt immediate tension in his shoulders. Juliana began to retreat silently, wanting to avoid further attention, but she wasn't quick enough. One of the guests, Patricia Mendez, wife of an MP, and known for her sharp tongue and opinions on service staff, decided it was the perfect moment to demonstrate superiority. "Excuse me," she called, her loud voice cutting through all remaining conversations. "Are you the cleaner?" Juliana stopped, but didn't turn around. "Yes, madam. Didn't they teach you to use the service entrance?" "Normally I do. There was a mix-up with the schedule." "How convenient. A mix-up?" Patricia laughed. Several people laughed along. "You people only show up at these hours when there are important guests." Ricardo began to move towards the corridor, but Maurice grabbed his shoulder. "Let Renata handle it," he whispered. "Don't make a scene." But Patricia wasn't finished. She approached Juliana, champagne glass in hand, stiletto heels tapping against the marble like a judgment. "Look at you, dirty, all sweaty, probably reeking of cleaning products." She leaned exaggeratedly close to Juliana. "Yes, definitely reek. Don't you have any shame?" Juliana turned slowly to face her. Her face showed no anger, only that infinite calm Ricardo had seen before. The calm of someone who had survived worse things than the humiliation of a bored rich woman. "That's the smell of work, madam. Honest work. The work that makes places like this look beautiful." Patricia arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "How cheeky. Did they teach you to talk back to your superiors like that?" "I don't have superiors. I have employers and clients. There's a difference." The silence grew thick, dangerous. Patricia took another step, invading Juliana's personal space. "Let me give you some advice, dear. People like you need to remember your place, because that place isn't talking back to people like me." And then, in a movement that seemed almost accidental, but Ricardo knew was completely intentional, Patricia stumbled and spilled the entire glass of champagne onto the $40,000 Persian rug. "Oh no," she said with feigned concern. "How clumsy of me. But I suppose that's what you're here for, isn't it? To clean up our messes." She pointed to the stained rug. "Kneel down there and clean it. Show us you do your job properly. If you do it quickly, who knows? Mr. Almeida might even give you a tip." The group of guests watched with a mixture of discomfort and morbid entertainment. No one intervened. No one said anything, because intervening meant siding with the cleaner against an MP's wife. And that was a social calculation no one wanted to make. Juliana looked at the stained rug, looked at Patricia, and did something extraordinary. She didn't kneel. She didn't run to get cleaning supplies. She stood tall, spine straight, head held high, and said in a clear voice that everyone heard, "No." Patricia blinked, genuinely surprised. "How dare you?" "No," Juliana repeated. "I won't kneel. I won't clean your accident, because you didn't spill that by accident. You spilled it because you wanted to humiliate me in front of witnesses, because it makes you feel powerful, because at some point in your life, you learned that power is measured by how many people you can force to their knees, and I don't kneel, not for you, not for anyone." The silence that followed was absolute. Not even the string quartet dared to play. All eyes were fixed on Juliana and Patricia. Patricia regained her composure with rehearsed speed. "Do you know who my husband is? An MP. I know. Everyone knows. You make sure of that every time you enter a room. I can get you fired with one phone call. You probably can, but you won't. And why not?" Juliana smiled, without humor. "Because if you do, you'll have to explain why a cleaner made you feel so threatened that you had to use your husband's connections. And that's not a story you want told in the circles you move in." It was at that exact moment that Ricardo pulled away from Maurice's grasp and strode across the space to the corridor. "Enough." His voice cut the silence like a blade. Everyone turned to him. Patricia immediately regained her social smile. "Ricardo, darling, we were just having a little chat with your employee. She's quite cheeky. You should do something." Ricardo positioned himself next to Juliana. Not in front. Beside, side by side. "Mrs. Patricia, I think there's a misunderstanding here. Juliana isn't just a cleaner. She's a professional who does work none of us would want to do. Work that requires discipline, resilience, dignity. 3 things that, frankly, I haven't seen much of here today." Patricia opened her mouth to protest, but Ricardo continued. "And as for the rug, don't worry. I'll clean it myself. Because in my home, guests don't humiliate staff, and staff don't kneel for anyone. Those are my rules. If you can't respect them, the door is right there." The shock on Patricia's face was visible. No one spoke to her like that. No one, especially not a businessman who needed political connections. Her face went from shock to fury in seconds. Is this an insult? No, this is a correction. There's a difference. Ricardo used the same words Juliana had used with him weeks ago. Patricia looked around, seeking support. She found only uncomfortable glances. Her husband, the MP, who had been observing from the living room with an unreadable expression, finally approached. Patricia, I think it's time we left. His voice was calm, but firm. It is time. The couple left without another word. The group of guests gradually dispersed, the entertainment over, conversations resuming in forcedly cheerful tones. But something had changed. Everyone had seen the inflexible Ricardo Almeida take a side. And that side was not the one expected. Juliana remained standing in the same spot, looking at Ricardo with an unreadable expression. Finally, she spoke in a low voice that only he heard. You didn't have to do that. I know. You lost an important political contact. He wasn't that important. This will cost you. Some things are worth the cost. Juliana studied him for a long moment. Why did you do it? Ricardo could have given a corporate answer, something about company policies, workplace environment, but he gave the truth. Because you were right that night in the kitchen. I saw. I didn't act. That ends now. Juliana nodded once, then, without another word, turned and walked away. But before leaving the penthouse, she paused at the door and spoke without turning around. Thank you. 2 simple, honest words. And to Ricardo, they were worth more than all the contracts and connections in the world. 3 weeks after the event, Ricardo's phone rang. It was 11 p.m. He was in his office reviewing contracts, unknown number. Normally he wouldn't answer, but something compelled him. Hello? The voice on the other end was familiar, but different, tenser, more urgent. Mr. Almeida, it's Juliana. Juliana? Ricardo straightened in his chair immediately. What happened? Sorry to bother you. I know it's late, but I need to ask a favor, and I have no one else to call. The fear in her voice triggered all his alarms. What do you need? My apartment has a leak. It got worse in recent months, but tonight the bathroom ceiling collapsed. Water's pouring into the girl's room. I've already moved the beds to the living room, but the landlord said he'll only fix it next month, and I don't have money to pay for private repairs. And the girls are coughing because of the mold and Her voice broke. For the first time since he'd known her, Ricardo heard real vulnerability. Where are you? At my apartment in the working-class suburb. Send me the address. I'm coming. You don't have to, Mr. Almeida. I just send me the address, Juliana. Now. Silence. Then a sigh of surrender. Okay. Ricardo hung up, grabbed his jacket, and left. He told his chauffeur he was going to the suburb. The man seemed surprised but asked no questions. The drive took 40 minutes, cutting through nocturnal Sydney. The further they drove from the affluent areas, the more the landscape changed. Tall, modern buildings gave way to simpler, more cramped constructions. Wide streets turned into narrow alleys. Abundant lighting became scarce. When they arrived at the address, Ricardo got out and looked. A 5-story apartment block. Walls with peeling paint, cracked concrete exterior stairs, clothes hanging on improvised lines, the smell of food and dampness in the warm air. Juliana was waiting at the entrance, wearing casual clothes, worn jeans and a simple t-shirt. Without her uniform, she looked younger, more vulnerable. You shouldn't have come. It's dangerous at this hour. I'm already here. Come. She guided him up the stairs to the 3rd floor. A narrow, dark corridor, some burnt-out light bulbs. She opened the door, and Ricardo entered. Smaller than he imagined, much smaller. A living room that was also a kitchen. 2 doors leading to tiny bedrooms, 1 bathroom, perhaps 40 square meters in total. But it was impeccably clean. Every surface shone. Old but well-maintained furniture, children's drawings on the walls, books organized on an improvised bookshelf, made of wooden crates. And in the living room, on a mattress on the floor, 2 girls slept huddled together, Luna and Sofia. Ricardo observed them. Luna, the older one, had a protective arm over her younger sister, even in sleep, a guardian's posture. Sofia, with her curly hair like her mother's, sucked her thumb as she dreamed. Beautiful, innocent, oblivious to the struggles their mother fought daily. The bathroom is here, Juliana said softly, guiding him. Ricardo entered and saw the damage. A hole in the ceiling the size of a plate, water dripping constantly, forming a puddle on the floor. Walls stained with black mold, a suffocating smell of dampness. How long has it been like this? The leak started 4 months ago. The hole opened tonight. And the landlord said he doesn't have money to fix it, that if I don't like it, I can leave. Ricardo took out his phone and called. Roberto, it's Almeida. I need an emergency team. Ceiling repair, leak, mold removal. Yes, now. I don't care if it's midnight, I'll pay triple. He gave the address and hung up. Juliana watched with an expression between gratitude and panic. I can't pay for this. I'm not charging you, Mr. Almeida. Call me Ricardo. She blinked in surprise, but didn't use the name. I can't accept this. We've talked about this. I don't need charity. It's not charity. Then what is it? Ricardo looked directly into her eyes. It's doing the right thing. Your daughters are breathing mold. That causes permanent health issues. You have no way to fix it. I do. It's that simple. Nothing is that simple. This time it is. The team arrived half an hour later. 5 men with tools and materials assessed the damage. They confirmed it would take 2 days of work to make everything right. They started emergency repairs immediately. While they worked, Ricardo sat in the small living room with Juliana. The girls continued sleeping, oblivious. Why are you still here? Juliana finally asked. Why didn't you send the workers and leave? Because I wanted to make sure you were okay. I'm not your responsibility. I know. So, why? Ricardo hesitated, decided to be honest, completely honest. Because since that morning I found you sleeping in my bed, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, about your strength, your dignity, about how you make me want to be a better person. And I know this is complicated. I know there's a power difference. I know I just helped you with this, but I need you to know it's not manipulation. It's he. Stopped. Juliana watched with wide eyes. It's admiration, respect, and something more I can't name, but I can't ignore. The silence between them was thick, charged. Finally, Juliana spoke, almost inaudibly. Do you know how dangerous it is for me to hear that? Why? Because my whole life I've had to protect myself from men with power, who see something in me they want to take. And I don't know if you're different, or just better at hiding it. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. She was right. How could she know? How could she trust? You're right not to trust, Ricardo said slowly. I won't ask you to trust. I'll just ask for something simpler. Let me help you find a better place to live. Not as a personal favor, but as an employer. Almeida Constructions has an employee housing program, apartments in our own buildings, with subsidized rent. You qualify. I've seen your work, your ethics, your dedication. You completely qualify. It has nothing to do with this. He gestured between them. It has to do with your daughters not breathing mold. Juliana processed this carefully. And if I say no, then I'll respect that, and the workers will fix this apartment anyway. And you'll continue working for me, if you wish, or not. Your choice. Always your choice. She studied him for a long moment, looking for deceit, manipulation, a hidden hook. Apparently, she found none. Okay, I want to see the housing options, but with a formal contract. Everything in writing. Nothing based on personal favor. Everything in writing, Ricardo agreed. And then, because he couldn't help himself, he added, But Juliana, I need you to know what I said before, about admiring you, about how I feel. That's real, and it won't change. Whether you have a new apartment or not, whether you work for me or not, because it has nothing to do with circumstance. It has to do with who you are. Juliana didn't respond, just looked at her daughters sleeping on the mattress on the floor. When she looked back at him, there were tears in her eyes that she refused to let fall. You're dangerous, Mr. Almeida. Why? Because you make me want to believe that fairy tales are real, and I can't afford that luxury. I have too much to lose. It's not a fairy tale, it's just possibility. Possibility is also dangerous when you have 2 daughters to feed. She stood up to check the progress of the repairs, leaving Ricardo alone with his thoughts and the growing certainty that he was falling in love with the most complicated, most stubborn, and most extraordinary woman he had ever met. The job offer came 2 weeks later. Ricardo asked HR to prepare a full package: administrative assistant position, decent salary, health benefits, employee housing program included, all formal, legal, traceable, on paper. When he presented it to Juliana in the construction company's office, she read every word of the contract 3 times. Why this role? Because you graduated in business administration with honors. Because Almeida Constructions is expanding, and I need someone to organize contracts, manage documents, coordinate suppliers, and you're perfectly qualified. I don't have recent corporate experience. Experience develops, talent doesn't. Juliana closed the contract and looked directly at him. If I accept this, and it doesn't work out, what happens? If it doesn't work out for a legitimate performance reason, there's a 3-month severance package. It's in the contract. Clause 12. And if it doesn't work out because things between us get complicated? There was the real question. the reason she had avoided him for 2 weeks. Ricardo leaned back in his chair. Then we'll talk like adults and find a solution that doesn't leave you without work or security. But Juliana, I need you to understand, this job is real. It's not a pretext to be near you. It's not a bribe. It's recognition of real talent for a real position. And the other thing, what you said that night, about admiring me, about how I feel. Ricardo took a deep breath. That's real too. It won't disappear whether you accept or reject this job. I can keep it to myself. I can be professional. I can keep my distance, but I can't lie and say it doesn't exist. Juliana nodded slowly. I need to think about it. Take all the time you need. The offer is valid for 30 days. She stood to leave, but stopped at the door. Ricardo, it was the first time she had used his name. The sound made something stir in his chest. Yes? Thank you for doing it the right way, for not pressuring me, for giving me a real choice. You deserve a real choice, Juliana. Always have. She nodded and left. 3 days later, she accepted the job. A month later, she moved with her daughters into an apartment in an Almeida Constructions building in Street Leonards. 2 bedrooms, full kitchen, mold-free bathroom, leisure facilities in the complex, a school 3 blocks away. The girls were euphoric, and Juliana, for the first time since Ricardo had known her, smiled without reservation. The transition to the new role was difficult at first. Juliana had knowledge and skills, but lacked the corporate confidence that comes from years of practice. She constantly second-guessed herself, apologized too much, minimized herself in meetings. But gradually, with time and support, she began to find her voice. And when she found it, it was devastating. She negotiated contracts with suppliers, her English impeccable. She reviewed documents, pointing out problematic clauses that lawyers had missed. She participated in meetings with investors, building relationships that turned into real business. And Ricardo watched with pride, mixed with something deeper. He saw her transform, not because he had changed her, but because she finally had the space and resources to be who she always was. A brilliant professional whom the world had forced to hide because university degrees didn't put food on the table when the economy collapsed. They maintained a strict professional distance for months. They didn't have lunch together, didn't work alone in a closed room. They communicated mainly by email, formal, courteous, appropriate. But there were moments, glances that lasted a second longer than necessary, accidental brushing of hands when passing documents, conversations in the elevator that seemed charged with everything they weren't saying. And Ricardo wondered if Juliana felt the same tension, the same magnetism, the same desire to cross the line they had both so carefully drawn. 3 months after Juliana had started at the company, Ricardo invited her to an event, a corporate dinner with investors, nothing personal, all professional. But when she arrived wearing a simple but elegant navy blue dress she'd bought with her first administrative salary, hair loose in natural waves, minimal makeup, she looked different, confident, belonging, nothing like the woman he had found sleeping, exhausted, months ago. But when their eyes met across the room, something passed between them. Recognition, a shared memory of where they had started and where they had arrived. During dinner, Juliana spoke with investors as an equal, discussed market strategy, analyzed trends, offered insights that made wealthy men pause and pay attention. And when someone asked how long she had worked at the company, Ricardo saw her hesitate for a fraction of a second before answering. 6 months, but it feels like a lifetime. At the end of the night, when everyone had left and they were alone in the hotel car park, Ricardo finally said what he had been holding back for months. You were incredible today. Juliana smiled, tired. Thank you. No, seriously, you owned that room. Those men respected you. As an equal, it still feels strange sometimes, getting used to people actually seeing me. Ricardo took a step closer. I always saw you. From that very first morning, Juliana raised her eyes to him. I know. That's why I'm here. The words hung in the air between them, a promise and a question at the same time. Juliana, Ricardo began, his voice softer, these last few months working with you have been the best of my professional life. But it's not just professional for me. It never was. I know, she whispered. Not for me either, he gasped. Seriously? She nodded. But I'm scared. Of what? Of messing it up. Of mixing things up and losing everything I've built. Of trusting and getting hurt. Of having hope and being disappointed. Ricardo took her hand. I can't promise I'll never disappoint you. I can't promise it'll be easy. But I can promise I'll respect you, that I'll value you, that if it goes wrong, I won't leave you with nothing. Juliana squeezed his fingers. And your daughters? I want to get to know them properly, not as a boss. As someone who cares about all three of you, that's a lot. I know, and if you're not ready, I understand. But I need you to know that's how I feel. Juliana was silent for a long time. Okay, she said finally. Let's try. Slowly. No pressure. My way. Your way, Ricardo agreed. Always your way. She leaned in and kissed him. Soft, quick, almost shy. But when they separated, both were smiling. We'll take it easy, she repeated. Easy, he promised. But inside, his heart pounded like never before. 3 months of careful dating later, on a sunny Sunday, Ricardo officially met Luna and Sofia. Centennial Park, 10 a.m. Nothing ostentatious, just a normal day. He arrived 15 minutes early, more nervous than he'd ever been closing a multi-million-dollar deal. His hands sweated, his heart raced. Juliana appeared, walking with the girls. Luna, the older one, serious, with evaluating eyes she clearly inherited from her mother. Sofia, smaller, round, with still childlike cheeks and a shy smile. Girls, Juliana said softly. This is Ricardo, my boss and my boyfriend. Luna took a step forward courageously. Hi. Her voice was firm, but without warmth. Evaluating. Hi, Luna, Ricardo replied, crouching down to her height. Your mum told me you want to be a teacher. Yeah, I was good at English when I was your age too. Were you? She immediately detected the past tense. Smart girl. Still am, but as an adult, we don't call it that anymore. We call it reading contracts and writing emails. And it's not as much fun. Luna almost smiled. Almost. Sofia hid behind her sister, observing cautiously. Ricardo spoke without approaching, respecting her space. Hi, Sofia. I like your sneakers. They light up when you walk. Sofia nodded shyly. Can I see? She took 2 experimental steps. The sneakers lit up, red and blue. Wow, those are the best sneakers I've ever seen. That drew a small, but real, smile. Want to walk? Ricardo suggested. There's a pond here with ducks sometimes. I like ducks, Sofia declared, suddenly finding her voice. Then let's go find ducks. They spent the morning exploring the park. Luna asked questions, many questions, testing him. Are you rich? I am. Why are you here then? Because your mum is important to me, and you're important to her. So you're important to me. That doesn't make sense, Luna challenged. You don't know us. You're right. That's why I'm here, to get to know you. If you want, and if we don't want to, then I'll respect that and leave. For real? For real. Luna processed that. Eventually, she nodded. Okay, you can stay for now. It was the most cautious approval Ricardo had ever received, and it meant more than any multi-million-dollar contract. At the end of the afternoon, after feeding ducks, having ice cream, and playing on the playground, as they were saying goodbye, Sofia spontaneously hugged Ricardo. Will you come back? If your mum lets me, yes. Mum? Juliana looked at Ricardo with a smile that reached her eyes. He can come back. Luna didn't hug him, but she squeezed his hand goodbye. A small, but significant, sign. Ricardo drove home in a trance. The day had been perfect, not because it was easy, but because it was real. A year after that first meeting in the park, Ricardo was at the apartment Juliana and the girls called home, helping Sofia with science homework, while Luna read on the sofa and Juliana prepared dinner in the kitchen. It was a normal Tuesday, nothing special, but Ricardo realized that was precisely it. The extraordinary was in the ordinary, in the routine, in the family. The smell of a home-cooked meal came from the kitchen, mixed with the homemade seasoning Juliana had learned from her mother. Sofia explained the solar system, pointing to colorful drawings she had made in her notebook. Mars is red because it has a lot of iron, she said, with the authority of someone who had just discovered the universe. And Jupiter is the biggest of all, bigger than all the other planets put together. Luna turned the pages of a thick book, completely absorbed in her world of words. Every now and then she let out a quiet laugh at something she read, and Ricardo felt a warmth in his chest. These girls had accepted him into their lives with caution, but honesty. Not as a replacement for the father they never knew, but as someone new, someone who chose to be there. When they had dinner together, Luna talked about a maths test she had aced. Sofia about a drawing her teacher had put on the classroom mural. Juliana about a difficult meeting she had navigated with a tricky client, closing a contract no one thought possible. And Ricardo realized this was happiness. Not closing a multi-million-dollar deal, not inaugurating a building, not acquiring a company. This moment around a simple table, eating home-cooked food, listening to stories of the day, being part of something bigger than himself. After the girls went to sleep, Luna with a book under her pillow because she could never stop reading, Sophia with the doctor's doll Ricardo had given her as a gift. He and Juliana stood on the small balcony of the apartment, looking at the illuminated Sydney stretching to the horizon. The night air carried the scent of approaching rain. "You know what's funny?" Juliana said, her head resting on his shoulder. "What? You found me sleeping where I shouldn't have been, making the biggest mistake possible, being the most vulnerable person I'd ever been. And that mistake brought us here." Ricardo pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "It wasn't a mistake. It was destiny. It was the universe protecting you, saying, 'Rest. Someone will find you here. Someone who will truly see you. And I was the lucky one who found you.'" Juliana leaned in and kissed him slowly, deeply, with all the gratitude and love that words couldn't express. "I love you, Ricardo Almeida. I love you, Juliana Martins dos Santos." And in that moment, looking at the city that had tested them, shaped them, transformed them, and finally united them, Ricardo understood something fundamental about true wealth. It wasn't in a travertine marble penthouse, not in a seven-figure bank account, not in an empire built brick by brick. Real wealth was in the people you chose to love, in the families you built not with blood, but with daily action, with conscious choice, with love proven not in words, but in presence. He had spent 38 years building material fortune while living in emotional solitude. He had everything money could buy and nothing that truly mattered. Until an exhausted woman slept in his bed and woke something in him that had been dead for so long he had forgotten it existed. The capacity to see another human being, to recognize dignity where society only saw service, to choose kindness over convenience, to allow himself to be transformed by love instead of merely consuming. He had found his family, not in an empty mansion where no one but him ever set foot, but here, in this apartment filled with children's laughter, scattered schoolbooks, light-up sneakers, solar system drawings on the fridge, the smell of home-cooked meals, and an extraordinary woman who taught him that true power doesn't come from controlling everything around you. It comes from allowing yourself to be vulnerable, from choosing love over pride, from recognizing value that was always there, but that he had never learned to see, until now, until this exact moment, standing on a simple balcony, looking at the city that never stopped, realizing he had finally come home. If this story touched your heart in any way, write a single word in the comments. New beginning. I want to know how many people this story reached today. Now tell me what moment touched you the most. When Ricardo covered Juliana sleeping, when he defended her at the event, or when he met Luna and Sophia. And don't forget to tell me what city you're watching from. Every comment reminds me why I keep telling these stories. If you believe there's still kindness in the world, give this video a like. If you know someone who needs to hear that it's never too late for a new beginning, share it with them. And if you want more stories that restore faith in humanity, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you in the next story.